Podcasting from the Lone Star State in Southern California, you're listening to the Coma Podcast with Cody and Matt.
Hey everyone, it is March 16th, 2021. It is a nighttime. We are recording this. So if you're hearing this, we are recording it actually on Tuesday night. And Matt, today we are going to be talking about something that happened in Atlanta, some shootings. All of this is kind of culminating on this big thing that I've been wanting to talk about as far as Asian hate crimes. They are on the increase in America, and that is our main topic today. We'll be talking about that in a little bit. But first, something I learned about Matt today that I did not know about, and I was a little bit shocked.
Oh, I know what's coming. Go ahead.
Matt and David do not use top sheets. Now, like when we explain this, it's like a fitted sheet, a top sheet, and usually like a comforter of sorts. They don't use a top sheet. And this all came about because it was, I saw it on Twitter. It was quote tweeted, and I was like shocked because some girl had tweeted about it not using a top sheet. And I was like, wait, that's a thing? And then Matt chimed in and was like, let us know, let the world know that him and David don't use a top sheet.
But you know what? We were not alone.
Monsters.
We weren't alone.
Supposedly. I actually have not heard of this. I had not heard that this was even a thing. Apparently, it's actually been a thing since like 2015, 2018. Around there is when it kind of started getting some traction because it was the infamous headlines of millennials are killing the top sheet. And so I didn't know about this until today, and I was just actually completely shocked about this. But apparently 41% of older Americans will not sleep without a top sheet. Overall, about 58% of Americans agree or strongly agree that a top sheet is essential. 2/3 of Americans age 55 and plus feel a top sheet is essential. But in fact, 18% of people ages 18 to 24 actually feel strongly against the use of the top sheet. That's in contrast to only 3% of the age 65 and plus. But Matt, why do y'all not use the top sheet? Like, what is the idea behind
it? It was one of those things that just started becoming a pain a couple of years ago. I never really liked using one. I like extra sheets and blankets, but David is a human hot rock, so the moment he falls asleep, he almost feels feverish to the touch, and he's always been this way. So it became like, well, it was just one more thing kind of holding in too much heat for him. And because I sleep next to him usually, I would start to sweat, or so he doesn't sweat. It makes me sweat. So if he falls asleep with his arm across me or something, I can wake up and like my chest and stomach or wherever his hand and arm will be sweaty, but he won't be sweaty. I'm like, that's nice. That's fair. It's totally fair. But he talked to me about it, and I was like, yeah, let's just stop using it. I hate using it, and the only reason we ever used it was because that's just what we were taught to do growing up.
So like, do y'all just have like a comforter, or?
Yeah, so what we do is we actually have we have these blankets we got. They're really, really thin, like thin coverlets almost, and they're real soft. And then we have a slightly thicker comforter than that we pull over that. So rather than a sheet and a thick comforter, it's more like a thin comforter and then a slightly thicker one than that. And if it's hot and we just need the slightest blanket, we have that. And that's all we use. It's so much more comfortable. It's still, they're still very soft. I sleep very well. And it's one less thing. And it's so much easier to make the bed.
You would not like my bed making. We have the top sheet. We have the comforter. I have like a billion pillows, then some blankets that go on top of the comforter.
Has worked for hotels and in housekeeping my entire life. I can make a bed. It will not defeat me. I'm just saying this is much easier when you're only contesting two comforters.
Yeah.
Each grab ends of the comforters from either side of the bed. So we have a king size bed. So we both lift, shake, bring it down, and the bed is made in about 30 seconds. I flip the pillows over each morning, fluff, done.
See, I just have a lot of stuff that has to go on.
Yeah, so David is very tall. So um
I love my top sheet because I usually sleep under the top sheet because I usually cover my head and everything else, and Ella loves that too.
oh,
So,
same.
but
I pull blankets up over my face and everything.
actually, it's not that weird to not use a top sheet because in Europe, top sheets aren't used a lot. They end up using duvet covers. Now, here is kind of the idea of why you should use a top sheet in some respects. It is because of cleanliness, because they have found 47 species of fungi that have been found in bed sheets. The average human sweats about 26 gallons of sweat a year. And so the idea behind this is that it will be on the sheet. And people, well, you should, I guess. I say this, you should. Who knows what the average is? But you should wash your sheets every week to every 2 weeks. And in
Yeah.
doing so, you're so like before duvet covers kind of got popular here in America, people had just like those big comforters with fluff, and that is a pain to wash because it's so big, it's so bulky, and a lot of
Yeah, we
people
don't
can't
have those.
actually wash it in their washing machine if you don't have a bigger washer. But then if you don't have a top sheet and you're using that only, then that is collecting all your sweat and all your debris and gross skin cells and all of that stuff. And so if you're not washing that comforter on a regular basis, that is just disgusting and gross.
So we don't
So
use a big heavy comforter. We do have one because it does randomly get cold, or if we have when we could have guests, uh, we'll occasionally let a guest use it because my office is also the guest room, so it can get very cold in here. So we do have one if it's necessary, but both both the blankets that go on this king size bed can both be thrown in the washer at the same time and be washed in one cycle and dried, and they will both be dried in another cycle. And
yeah.
I'm really paranoid about drying because a lot of people don't shake out their things. So before, when I
Mm.
throw stuff in the dryer, like my jeans, I shake them out. Hoodies, I shake them out. Towels, I shake them out before I throw them in the dryer. And when we get the blankets out of the dryer, they're dry, but unless you literally set them on fire, they're not ever going to be 100% dry because it's a blanket.
Same
So
with towels.
I hang them over the banister. Our towels weirdly dry just fine, and
Do
I
they?
find that
We
weird.
have
Yeah,
those big
but
bath sheet towels.
so we have a banister that looks down into our stairwell that goes down to the first floor. So I hang both blankets over that and just let them swing there for an hour or two, or
Yeah.
the day we wash them, and then we'll put them on at bedtime because it literally
See,
takes 10 seconds.
I think you are in the minority because you're making
Yeah.
sure it's done properly. I feel a lot of these people who aren't using top sheets are using that comforter. And so the idea behind it in Europe is they don't use it a lot is because duvet covers are really popular in Europe. And so they are able to take that, the lining, the overall sheet, which is a pain to put on duvets anyway. But also in Europe, they usually take that top bedding piece, comfort or not a comforter, but duvet-ish, and they usually take it outside every day and let it kind of be out in the sun and air out.
So
And
I
so
think
that
that's
is a natural disinfectant. But in America, we just don't do
yeah.
that.
So growing up, my mom washed our clothes. She might use the laundromat sometimes, but a lot of times if she just washed our clothes, I remember our clothes hanging outside. I remember many places we lived had like that little tree out back. You could kind of spin around and
Yeah.
hang your clothes up. I remember my mom doing that. If we had the space here, I would totally air dry our blankets outside because
Yeah.
I love the smell of it.
If you do not use a top sheet, make sure you're washing whatever you have on top
Yes.
at least once or twice a
Gosh.
week because that's the whole point of the top sheet essentially.
Yeah,
And
seriously.
if you're not taking it outside.
And
But
if you get a cold or something, wash your sheets. Like you get a cold, wash your sheets, change your toothbrush.
yes.
Disinfect your toothbrush with peroxide, please.
Speaking of the virus, this is the 1 year anniversary, Matt. The 1 year anniversary of Vanessa Hudgens going on, I believe, Instagram Live and saying, "It's a virus. I get it. I respect it. Even if everybody gets it, yeah, people are going to die." Do you like my
I
impression
remember
there?
that and going, well,
I mean, terrible, but inevitable, right? Maybe I shouldn't be doing
yeah,
this right now.
I
There was I mean, I guess she was speaking the truth. People were going to die, and people weren't going to listen.
In how she said it, because technically that did happen. However, that was maybe not the way to go about expressing yourself.
Remember,
I was like, what the hell is wrong with you? Shut up.
Ariana Grande, when she licked the donut or something, and then said something about hating America, or America was just trash. And she got a lot of hate, but then, okay, Matt, I want to get your opinions on this story. This story is coming out this weekend, but Will Forte is going to be starring in a new show on NBC for Peacock, the Peacock network. Not much is known about it, obviously. I don't even think it's been written yet. Executive producers and written by people who produced and wrote the TV show on Amazon, I believe, called Fleabag, which has gotten a lot of good buzz about it being really funny. But this show starring Will Forte is going to be called Expiration Date. And it's basically this man, he's overcome with grief. He takes out a life insurance policy that covers suicide if the individual doesn't take their life within a year, knowing that he won't have to worry about the finances for his family. The show will follow him as he decides how to spend the last 12 months of his life. Now, there's been a lot of people come out saying that NBC shouldn't be doing this. It's glamorizing suicide, could lead to a lot of issues. Thoughts?
Wow. So I was not expecting that. Not at all. Thank you, Cody. Thank you for that one. Wow. Okay. So it's really,
do you think it's reckless?
It's really in how it's written, it's one of those things. It is an opportunity to put in trigger warnings and PSAs, and depending on how, again, I know nothing about this. This is solely a cold question because I did not know this was coming. I was like, oh shit, okay. That this is an opportunity to bring the topic out in the open and say things that a lot of times things get said that people don't like, but the problem is we're all thinking it and there's no way to go about it. We don't have a script. We don't have a book to talk about it. You don't talk about it outside of a therapist's office. So it's going to generate a lot of controversy, and it just depends if they're taking a comedic edge to it or if it's going to be like a comedy drama where it's serious, but when they're not on that topic, there are comical moments. So I'd really have to watch a couple episodes to kind of see, to possibly change my opinion or adjust my thoughts here. But my thoughts are, if it's going to happen, I think it could be a good thing to bring to the surface, because a lot of people believe that suicide is just an act of selfishness. It's the most selfish thing you could ever do. And, they won't hear anything about it. And I'm like, well, that's a lot of judgment for somebody who doesn't live in that other person's head. Yeah. And many times, people do not understand how depression and anxiety work. And when you're a prisoner in your own head, if you've not experienced where you can't get out of bed for 3 straight weeks, you don't know what this person's going through. You don't know what's happening in their doctor's office. You don't know how they've been traumatized over and over and over and over. And likely it was not one time. A lot of people feel that when these things happen, sometimes it does come from one event. But a lot of people don't realize that, yes, it might have been a traumatic event and maybe it happened years ago, but they don't understand that their uncaring attitude, the dismissiveness, the get over it, and it re-traumatizes a person over and over and over and over. So depending on how the character handles it, or how, the show handles the character, if they can make a fully realized person and bring the audience along to maybe give some insight. I hope they do some kind of like sensitivity training, or somebody that has experience of what goes on in somebody's head, that, maybe we get like an internal dialogue along with what they see, because maybe there's an opportunity to show representation, to say like, hey, I see this person, because whatever the character ultimately decides to do along the way, it can bring out, even if it's Hollywood, it can still use real life tools that are available to people that need help and how to help them. And I think like I said earlier already, that there is a big opportunity to do something good with this, as it's dark, triggering subjects, but we can't
Yeah,
not look at it, because when you don't look at it, the things hiding in the dark are also the people that need your help the most, and they're hiding in the dark and they need help.
yeah,
And ignoring it does not make it go away. So
yeah.
I would say, yeah, let's see it. Give it a chance to put it out
Mhm.
there.
I think, it was just announced that it was happening. It hasn't even been written yet. Obviously, they know the concept for it. But I mean, I feel with a television show like this, he's ultimately not going to kill himself. Ultimately, I think you're going to see, because it's talking about him, what he's going to do with the last remaining 12 months of his life. I'm sure the show, if it gets picked up for multiple seasons, we'll see what the timeline of that situation ends up being. But I think it's going to be something along the lines of discovering, he's going to end up discovering that he does have a life worth living. There'll be small moments, maybe with his family or his kids, that
Right.
are going to trigger, oh, maybe a rethinking of things.
I really hope they do that, like, more incrementally, and show that it is a never ending journey. Like, generally people do not. I'll just go ahead and speak from my own experience from a suicide attempt. I will tell you, it is not the next day I felt better. Did not feel
Yeah.
better the next day. I felt slightly, like, the width of my fingernail, the thickness of my fingernail less bad. That was it. That was absolutely it when I woke up in my bed the next morning. And nobody had even known what happened yet. I
Yeah.
knew. I knew it happened. And it is a constant journey, day by day, and there isn't literally more than a day or two that goes by that doesn't run through my head. And so, bringing that to the large screen, there is such an opportunity to show that, depending on what the writers do, assuming they're not stifled by producers that just want it sensationalized, because it's not something that needs sensationalized. What happens in our heads is just as dramatic, it's just as a dramatic roller coaster. Like, you could just literally put what's going on in someone's head down on paper, bring it to life, and you've got an entire series. And that's just
Yeah.
what happens in someone's internal dialogue, let alone what they experience with work, their families, their spouses, their kids, and how each person is different. I think it'd be interesting to follow, like, a group, of people that, they're either tied together or not, where you see their different experience, where you see because what people think depressed is, you follow that person. Well, people don't know what depressed is. Someone that has been up here and is now here, and vice versa, because 1 year can be a lot for some people. They spiral down, they'll continue spiraling down.
Yeah.
Some Not everybody that struggles with a depression struggles with addiction. They sometimes are in tandem, but they're not always. But it's easier for people to kind of brush it with you know, the same strokes, and say, okay, because they need something to categorize. Because if
Yeah.
you don't understand something, the first thing you try to do is how you learn it in a broad sense. When we, like, learn what depression is, we learn what anxiety is. We kind of learn, oh, mental health. Well, generally, when you bring up mental health, nobody thinks of positives. They think of, oh, my mental health is struggling. Not always. So then you start breaking it down, like, what is depression versus anxiety? What are triggers? It's not just a word thrown out from since 2016 talking about angry liberals. No, the word triggered means something. So again, there's a lot of room for this show to do a lot of good, while also very likely triggering the absolute shit out of a lot of people, unfortunately. Like, so it's very important to warnings, PSAs, like, hey, this is what's going to be in this episode, because even somebody that wants to see it, that agrees with what's happening, that supports what's happening, may not need to see that. They would, a slight warning just to say, you know what, I'm gonna skip this week's. Could
Yeah.
be a really good thing until they have a chance to read the Wikipedia or have somebody talk to them and see if they're ready to watch it.
Yeah.
I
I think that's
trigger
one
some
thing.
conversations with therapists. You
Yeah.
know,
I think, go ahead.
No, it's okay. That's what I was just meant in a good way, like, to trigger a conversation, to generate conversation in the country and people with their therapist. Because if you don't trust your therapist or feel comfortable talking to them, you're imposing your own roadblocks, unfortunately. Or if your therapist maybe isn't a good fit for you, so
Yeah.
shows like this, even when they're sensationalized, if it's done in a not exploitative, I can't remember which word it is, way, there's opportunity, there's good opportunity here.
Yeah, I think TV, movies, these shows, Hollywood has the opportunity at times to really help with change or to help bring about something and to bring stories and bring things to light. It's just whether it's done the way it should be done or whether it's not. We've had times where they were going to, I think the creators of Game of Thrones was going to do a series on what if the Civil War was different or something like that, and it got a lot of backlash. And so, obviously, if things are done right, maybe it could be good. We'll see. We'll see. Obviously, we'll see what happens. The mental health nonprofit Inseparable has said that they call it widely irresponsible, callous concept that will endanger countless viewers. They don't know anything about the show concept yet, but they still believe that the concept alone is grounds for it to not move forward. No word from NBC Universal on what they have to say on this, but we'll see because it was just recently announced and it's just now kind of getting out in the world.
I think slamming something like that is not helpful yet. Like, give it a chance to, because yes, there are absolutely awful ways to go about this, and all it takes is one person who writes the promo to write it wrong, and you just absolutely, shot yourself in the foot.
And this is going to be for Peacock. So a lot of times these companies are able to do things a little bit differently, or they're not having as much pressure put on them as far as ratings or trying to get certain ratings, since it is going to be on the Peacock app. So it's not having to get like a broadcast type rating. So sometimes a little bit different that they want out of it. And so maybe they do want something. The people behind it are all like really good people, and they produce and put out great stuff. So we'll see what happens if anything happens. Coming up next, we're going to be talking about Asian Americans and the hate and the bias that has been happening around COVID that has continued to the Atlanta spa shootings that happened just recently. That's next. And we are back, and today we are going to be talking about the Atlanta spa shootings. I believe 8 were killed in the shootings in 3 metro Atlanta spas. They do have a suspect in custody. There's a whole big thing around this because basically since, Matt, COVID happened, and obviously we had the former president talking about the China virus, there's been an increase of hate crimes against Asian Americans. And actually, there have been, so many reports around the country since this began. About 3,800 reports have happened that have just been reported. A lot have gone unreported, but have been reported since COVID began. And actually, 500 of those incidents have happened just so far this year. So that kind of leads to this Atlanta spa shooting, which is just incredibly crazy. It wasn't just in one location either.
Right. And right before we get to that, there's something I wanted to bring up. When we talk about this on the podcast, if you were around for season 1, we discussed a lot of crimes against, it ended up being black trans women. And it wasn't that we were ignoring other communities. It's just we happened to be focused on that person because that was the most unreported, underreported, and we were focusing on crimes that did not receive media attention. And so we want to make sure that when we're talking about, any non-white group, that we're, 1, using the correct terms, and 2, not trying to lump all together. We all know, like, when we say LGBTQ, like, between us, like, when we say, oh, the gay boys, we're talking about, we know we don't just mean gay white boys. Cody and I know that when we're talking to each other, but to somebody listening or somebody who isn't part of the community or wouldn't know that about us, it would be very easy to understand why somebody would think that. So I just want to make sure, like, tonight we're talking about this, we're talking about the Asian community. And like I said, before we get to that, something I want to talk about in our own community, in the LGBTQ plus community, is the racism against the Asian community within our population is insane. And a lot of people, I think it goes unsung. Like, there's always like, oh, well, somebody makes like an anti-black joke or makes a racist Mexican joke. And it's like, Jesus, y'all, what's wrong with you? But there, there's racist terms for pretty much every minority group. And if you're on Twitter and have any Asian mutuals, you have seen threads and threads, and hopefully you took the time to read them and understand how, one, this person has decided to share their experience and then sometimes just gets re-traumatized again because someone will go through, some jerk or troll will comment something racist on it. And several of just my mutuals talked about, how when they moved, someone threw a racist term at them at an airport, in a bar, in a restaurant, in public, broad daylight. This was not, everybody was drunk with the friends, and it was a friend they just got too comfortable with and thought it would be okay to say that. No, this is a complete stranger. And it happens so much. Like, I don't know, Cody, I'm sure you've seen it, or people post like their app screenshots of being rejected solely because they're Asian, not because they disliked them, not because, oh, you're really cool, but I'm not really into Asian guys. What the holy fuck? That's racist. That is racist. When you disqualify a guy or a person that you're just seeing solely based on their race, that's racism. You're disqualifying an entire group solely because of how they look, not because, oh, I think this person drinks too much and I don't think I'm going to connect with them. If somebody drinks or smokes or uses drugs, that's a preference. They're Asian, I don't want to go out with them. That's racist. That's fucking racist. So now that we're getting into this, because yes,
I also just want to mention, that's what I was going to also mention too. It's not just those who you don't want to date somebody who is Asian. There's also a whole issue of Asian fetish, and
that is present in every group. I definitely know. I would not share my DMs because that would just be inappropriate, because my accounts are only 4 or 5 years old or less, so everybody's still very much around and present, and I'm not trying to shame anyone in this manner, but we really want to highlight that racism and fetishism exists, and it's equally inappropriate. Whatever relationship you have with like that one person, that whatever boundaries y'all have, that's between y'all, but keep those other things in mind. It's not okay. And if you think saying, oh, I'm not racist because, I had an Asian friend once, that's not, you hear yourself. And again, I am not in any way trying to speak like for anybody. I'm just saying that, if you look like me and Cody, then maybe you shouldn't, throwing those terms out and say, it's okay, I didn't mean it like that. Just don't talk. Don't comment. Like those threads I told you I read, I didn't comment on them. I sat and read, because Google and the internet exists, and so does Twitter. And it could be, when you see something you don't understand, you don't need to comment. Well, since someone explained that to me, Google will explain it. That you can look it up. And if somebody says they had a racist term thrown at them, or tells you of their experience, or posts about it, throwing out things like, well, it's not that big of a deal, you need to get over the words. They're not telling you for therapy. They're putting it out there to tell you it's real, and that, to put their experience out there. You don't need to go back there and tell them what you think. That's so. And as Cody said, our former president had mentioned this as the China virus. And if you think that's not real, a man walked up to me while I was holding my nephew in January, who is 4 years old. He was literally on my arm, like playing with my hat. And the guy goes, "You still wearing a mask? You're going to get this vaccine from this China virus?" I'm like, "Are you kidding me?" I'm like, "Sir, you need to walk away. Like, you do not have a friend in me." Nope. No. We're not doing this. And I, where I live, I don't live in a white area, but this was a white guy, an older white guy that walked up to me. He was comfortable telling me what he did for a living, what area he lived in, and asked if my nephew was my kid. And, he was very, very comfortable with all that. And I'm like, he's like, "This is from a lab in China." And I'm like, you need to stop talking, sir. And he just walked away mumbling, like, keep doing this. don't think there's anything wrong with him. He's just a jerk.
Yeah.
But that has happened to me a few times in my life, like because one of my friends suggested that because I looked like him, that he might have thought that I would have supported it because I was holding a little blonde-haired boy. Well, my nephew is biracial, so no, you don't have a friend in me for sure.
Yeah.
But I don't need to have a biracial nephew to realize that is wrong behavior and to say something. Like it's just. But anyway, but I wanted to just bring that up in this topic, because it's important and it doesn't just affect, but this is what's in the news. This happened today. Cody and I, we're going to talk about something else, but because things are instigated by our former president, and like Cody mentioned, the statistics are just way up from a reported attacks. There was the elderly woman that was attacked in the street the other day. And, this poor woman, she is bruised and everything. I mean, she survived it, but what possessed you to attack an elderly woman that is just, you were not defending yourself,
minding her own
not
business,
trying to back away. You physically assaulted a 70-something-year-old woman, and I'm just like horrified. She could have been killed, and today's, now when I first saw the reports today, it was 7 people had been killed, and now it's 8. And 1 person has been wounded. And this was in Atlanta. And as Cody said, it was in several locations. The police were called to one, and then another, and then another, and then here we are. So, Cody, I'll let you go to it here.
Yeah, the police responded to a robbery call at the Gold Massage Spa in Atlanta. That's where they found initially 3 people dead. Now, while they were there, the police received another call of shots directly across the street at the Aroma Therapy Spa, and that's where they found another person dead. Now, at the time, the 4 victims were female, appeared to be Asian, but it was too early to say if there was any connection between the 2 spas. They've since increased patrols around the area and the businesses, and the FBI is also assisting in this particular case. Now, they did arrest somebody. The suspect, he was taken into custody about 3.5 hours after the killing. His name is Robert Aaron Long. He's just 21 years old. And let's see, they spotted his vehicle. There was a chase that ensued. And that's when the state trooper performed a maneuver and sent his SUV out of control. And then they took him into custody without incident after that whole incident. And that's where he is now. So they don't know that any connection between the 2, but there is video evidence that is suggesting that it is likely that the same person was involved for both shootings. Again, still investigating the situation.
So all these places were within driving distance of each other, and like Cody said, that it does appear that way. But at the time we are recording this, which is 11 something right now Central Time, that it is not confirmed that there was more than one person or that they were or were not connected. It just appears at this time that they were, and very likely they probably are.
Yeah, video footage was found with the suspect's car in the area around the time. And so obviously he's a person of interest, and they're putting all the pieces together before they're actually coming out with the information. Investigation first. You don't want to say things until you have all of the information.
Right. That's why we're just want to note that part. Now in New York, per CNN, a statement was released to them from their police departments that they are deploying to police into the Asian communities there and increasing security, because for obvious reasons, and the FBI is assisting law enforcement. And I know that this is more of a, not normally something we would cover so immediately, but that we didn't cover in season 1, because I want to address this while we have a chance to, is that because we've changed the format of how we do things. Cody and I have more time. We've made more time. So our goal is to report more on current events as they happen, if we can. And we wanted to today, and then this started unfolding, and we're like, well, let's try to collect as much information as possible, and here we are. So it's not that we haven't reported on prior events before as they happened. We just didn't have the information, and we weren't able to get to our laptops and get set up. We had different setups. Now we are, I would say, would be more streamlined. It'd be more an accurate way to describe it. I just want to point out, like, it's not that the other things that we weren't supportive immediately, just this has happened, and we have since had upgrades and streamlining to our processes that we're able to sit down and, work a little more on demand. And we want to make sure that this gets out, and we will provide updates as it goes.
Yeah, police haven't released a motive yet, but one group, the Stop AAPI Hate, they've already denounced the shooting, saying the reported shootings of multiple Asian American women today in Atlanta is unspeakable. It's an unspeakable tragedy for the families of the victims, first and foremost, but also for the Asian American community, which has been reeling from high levels of attacks, racist attacks, over the course of the past year. They go on to say that these latest attacks will only exacerbate the fear and pain that the Asian American community continues to endure. And so, again, like we talked about at the beginning, it's something that the community has been having to deal with a lot ever since Donald Trump started talking about the China virus. It's really put into head. And then obviously Fox News replays all of this stuff, and they have guests on to say this stuff. And it really just brainwashes people that are watching or who like worship the former president. It brainwashes them into now targeting these people. And like you said, the woman, the elderly woman who was injured, didn't do anything, but just because she was Asian American. And immediately after COVID started happening, and he said this stuff, you were having people like get slurs thrown at them or like beat up in subway stations. And
I was literally just reading yesterday, a lady said she walked into a restaurant, and the people started like screaming at her to get out, and they didn't want to get the virus, et cetera, et cetera. And she was like, what the hell? And
it's like they're Americans.
Ignorant. And this started so quickly from the former president pulling this nonsense. And so here we are with this a year later, and it's impacted. People are afraid to go out, and Asian businesses in the Asian community have all been affected. Several of them have shut down, and local restaurants that depend more on their locations have been, one of them here, a restaurant here called the Noodle Tree. One of our friends lives on that side of town where it's at here. And he had gone there, and he texted us and said that some former president supporters had tagged it, and it was just covered in graffiti. Their glasses, everything was sprayed down, and that's awful, and so it's happening, and it's real, and it's not enough to say, I'm not racist. No, you need to speak up when there's a problem. Was I expecting some random guy who was like double my size to walk up to me at Starbucks and tell me about the quote unquote China virus and what a conspiracy it is and how we don't want to, he's not getting that vaccine, all that, while I'm holding a 4-year-old. And
what's amazing
is making our drink. I'm at Pickup, and she is hearing this like.
What's amazing to me is that it's a hoax. It's a conspiracy. Yet the China people, according to Trump, brought it over. Like, wait, which one is it? Is it real?
Yeah. So the entire world has gotten this all to upend the former president. And now, FYI, the former president and his wife have gotten, they were vaccinated in January.
Yes.
Also, he is now calling people, trying to encourage them to get vaccinated, and even pointing out that the people he's calling were big supporters of his and probably voted for him and donated.
He did release a statement saying that the vaccine wouldn't have happened without him. It would have taken 5 years, or maybe never would have happened without him. So it's like a whole crazy thing. Anti-Asian sentiment actually has jumped 1,900% in New York City just in 2020. So again, this is happening here in America, not just in America though. It's happening around the world actually.
Right.
Because we can't even just look at it as a symptom of Trump, because it is happening around the world.
And you asked, how does this happen after Pearl Harbor happened? And I remember learning in school about Pearl Harbor, and then how our Japanese citizens were thrown in internment camps.
Mm-hmm.
I think it is George Takei has talked about it, and how so we know this has happened before over it's amazing how when a couple of bad apples, cops or white kids do something bad, it's like, well, this lone wolf over here, but you attach any moniker to any whatever event happens and suddenly that whole group is demonized. I'm like,
and that brings up the point of the World Health Organization really has come forward with naming particular diseases and viruses that happen. Of course, in the past, we have named diseases and viruses after the location that it was found. This was initially was referred to as the Wuhan virus initially, and this was before it spread across the world. So it can definitely be misaccurate. And everything, because like you were saying, the Spanish flu did not originate in Spain, although there's no exact or consensus on the exact origin. It just it's unknown exactly, but the virus came to be associated with Spain for several reasons, which were at the time largely political, because it was happening during the backdrop of World War I. And so again, political reasons at the time. But again, that's why the World Health Organization does not like anymore naming these viruses. And that's a more recent thing, obviously, because some of these viruses have been fairly new. But that's why it happens around the world, is because a lot of these places, and again, there's conservative groups, more progressive groups all throughout the world. And so it's competing forces on each side. It makes it a political situation. But it's important to, like, I guess, speak out when you see stuff. If you see people posting things on Facebook, I don't want to say argue with them, because a lot of times you don't get anything out of it. People have their minds made up. There are times that you can change people's minds, because sometimes they just don't know, or they didn't mean to say what they wrote because they weren't thinking or whatnot. But a lot of times also they're just bots. Right. That is a big number of things,
or
actually.
Trolls, which can be worse, because they're just there to infuriate you. They're just there to raise your blood pressure. Report them. Report, block, and mute. And the reason I say to report, because when you comment on something, it's like Twitter. When you comment on something, you inadvertently give it a platform. That's how the Kent State, I'm trying to really not be overly rude, but the Kent State Breitbart princess, who, she knows she's hated. She doesn't care, because she gets people talking. If she gets people talking, that's views and clicks. If you understand how things work, when you get views and clicks, clickbait, there's a reason it's called clickbait, because when you get that sensationalized clickbait, you draw in a ton of revenue. I mean, obviously Cody and I do podcasts and we post things. So we want people to watch it. We want people to learn it. But when we set this up, our intent was to not have clickbait, because that is not the kind of attention we wanted. That is not what we wanted established.
I mean,
hers don't care, because it's money, it's attention, and it gives them a bigger platform. And that's how they get endorsements from Fox News and get brought on and it's considered news when they're actually just talking heads. They are no more influential as far as their news than me. They just happen to have on millions, but they're investigative crap, and when you look at them, it's like, I'm sorry, and something that should also be considered, if you're on the same side as the KKK, even if you're not part of the KKK, that should really cause you to reevaluate something. Really, many people will never don a white hood and robe and say, I'm probably part of the KKK. But if you're voting and acting alongside the same group of people and following the same group of people, that group says, what a great idea. You know what? We'll follow them. Even if it's their last choice, they're still following them. You should really think about your life choices.
One thing is, I think racism has never left. And I don't want to say this is an American problem. This is a world problem.
Oh, absolutely.
And so
but we are here, and this is where we can do something.
Yeah. So like we've talked about on the Late Show. We have not talked about it on the podcast, but we talked about Meghan Markle and Piers Morgan and the whole situation. And then our friend, not our friend, but Sharon Osbourne, on the talk, not even trying to
That
get into.
situation just keeps deteriorating.
No, it does. Currently, the
And
talk that she's on is on
something
hiatus. It was supposed to be on hiatus for 1 week. It's continued to be on hiatus till Tuesday because there's an investigation. But again, racism exists, and is shown in the respect of Sharon Osbourne, because the whole conversation was not even centering on her, but somehow she let herself, because I think she felt that people were talking against her when they weren't, but
he
she
took it
was.
personally.
Yeah. But now it's opened it up to reveal what probably was there, and probably.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, Cody, because this might surprise you, but I have an opinion. I went and looked more into it. I try not to give things
Yeah.
like that. I read it, but I try not to give it attention because I don't want to inadvertently comment and spread more. Like, she does not need more attention. But I tried to because I thought you would want to talk about it, because you're usually more adept at these things than I am, and you're a little more, up to date on it. But I went and read, and then her publicist or somebody released a statement on her behalf saying, that she is aghast at these accusations and their slander, etc. And she has invited people to her house and, gatherings and throne gatherings. And I want to talk about that. That is actually a key point that is getting missed in a lot of people that really are not managing to educate themselves, because they say, well, I invited everybody from work to my home. Of course they would be welcome in my home, because they think of racism as what we saw in the old movies, or we see portrayed as setting a cross on fire and marching in a white robe. Well, yeah, that's obviously racist and very bad. But if you invite everybody to your table, how can you be considered racist? You can do something nice and still be criticized for poor behaviors that are ignorant, inappropriate, and yes, racist, because racism is what? Systemic. Our systems are generally built to favor me, the cis white guy. I am totally white. Do you think that 30 years ago, if Cody and I did this with his last name, how well it would have gone, even though he's as fair skinned as I am? He would likely have been told to change his name to something more, let's change it to something a little more European, a little more American, when people are just dumb and don't understand that America is actually Canada, the United States, and Mexico. But people are dumb. And and I wanted to talk about this specifically because it's important to understand that being held accountable is not being canceled. People were not screaming initially to say, get her off the air. They were trying to say, hey, hold on. You can say, thank you so much for your invite. I appreciate it. And you can believe it even comes from the heart, and also say, but when you talk about my group, this part of me, it isn't right. Now, I'm not speaking on behalf of anybody but myself, because just being a gay guy, like, this is something my parents would say. My stepdad threw out an incredibly homophobic comment the other day. He goes, it's okay, it's not directed at me. And he's like, well, I never have gotten super shitty with you for being gay. And I'm like, I can say thank you for not hate criming your own stepson, and at the same time criticize you for saying what you said towards my community, because we're not a punching bag. And that same energy is what I'm trying to focus here on Sharon Osbourne. She's a wealthy, privileged white woman. And, and I want to acknowledge that part of her statement. That's what she's hung up on. She's not focused on, oh, but what I said could be racist. She's saying, but I've invited all these people into my home. I send them Christmas gifts. And she doesn't do it for recognition. She's probably done wonderful things for people. Like when Ellen got, the big Ellen controversy. Well, it's true. Ellen has done things for families and changed lives. She has done whatever attitude was behind it, doesn't matter. She has done amazing things for gifting people that were in bad positions and changed their whole world and lifted people up with her platform and her money. That's wonderful. You can still say you did a great thing here, but when you do this is still not right. You don't just because somebody's up here and does wonderful things doesn't mean they're above the law, doesn't mean they're above criticism.
Well, and a lot of times like we say, cancel. If you just can come out and recognize the problem and try to fix the problem, that does a whole lot of good than just completely trying to deny it. I mean, this whole debacle started with her because Cheryl, one of the black co-hosts on the show, was trying to give Sharon Osbourne a chance to just like clear up her tweet supporting Pierce Morgan, and it blew into all of this. And then also just talking about inherent racism that exists within families, and you just grow up with it a lot of times. And a lot of times, unless there's something that kicks you out of that, it just is going to be in your mindset. And you might not be openly racist against people, like you were saying, like she's inviting people to her house and doing this or that. You know, we don't know all the behind the scenes stuff. There are some things that are coming out that her time during the talk, she was saying certain things about
Right.
Julian and stuff.
That's just kind of opening. We don't have a lot of information on
But
that yet.
like you can look back to Kelly Osbourne, her daughter, who was one of the co-hosts on The View a few years ago, and she was saying she was talking about Donald Trump's controversial stance on immigration. And then she said, if you kick out every Latino out of this country, then who's going to be cleaning your toilets? In the sense that, you know what I mean? But I'm saying that in LA, they always, and then Rosie Perez was on the show at the time, and she's like, Latinos are not only saying they're not the only ones cleaning. And Osborne cut her off and said, no, I didn't mean to say it like that. Come on. I would never mean it like that. I'm not part of this argument.
But that's what you said, you know, and that's the hardest part. It's always trying to say, well, that's not what I meant, but it is what you just said. And what the problem is here is I read a really fascinating thing on Twitter a few years ago. It's not so much the very first thought you have, because sometimes the very first thought you have isn't the appropriate one. It's the one after that where you're like, no, that's wrong. Because what you a lot of times first think is a lot of times what was beaten to your head as a child, you cannot control what you learned from your parents. You can control how you react to it. Like my mom has been a motel or hotel maid or housekeeper, whatever title you want to give it, my entire life. My grandmother was the grounds manager for a Methodist church that owned like a city block in Fort Myers, Florida. I grew up around that, so I never saw any shame in it, and I didn't understand why there was, and I didn't understand the jokes either, because the ladies my mom worked with were all different. Like, you know, they were all different backgrounds. Some didn't even speak English, and they were still like lovely. It didn't occur to me because my mom just doesn't think like that. She's so sweet, and she just likes people. If you're nice, my mom's one of those people. If you're nice to her, if you're nice to her, she'll be nice back. Now the problem here is that she will not speak up though. Like when this conversation happened with my stepdad and I, she sat there and I said, Mom, I know you can hear me. I know you're sitting there. You're sitting there quietly. You've never spoken up, because my stepfather has thrown out multiple anti-gay things, but because he's like, well, you're welcome in my house. Well, go fuck yourself. I don't care. I don't even like you. But that's besides the point. I'm like, Mom, you hear this? I am your child. That is my stepfather. Like, I am yours. Like, you are supposed to defend me. The same as I would defend you if, you know, when my stepfather has made comments about her mental capacity not being at what it should be for her age, and, you know, the other issues she's had. When he gets mad and blames that or throws that out like the punchline, I have got up in arms. I have gotten in his face, because that's what I'm supposed to do. That's my mother. It is her job to defend me, just as it's our job when these things happen to call them out, like holding Ellen accountable. Calling it out is saying, this is wrong. And instead of throwing out an immediate blanket defense of, I never did that, look at all these other things I did. Yeah, we see all those wonderful things you did. This does not invalidate that necessarily. This is just saying, yeah, cool, you did wonderful things with this platform. But here, you've done something wrong, and this attitude is not acceptable. And I noticed in Hollywood, a lot of it comes from places of privilege where you're not used to being told no. I can tell you, working at Disney, we dealt like Regis Philbin, huge jerk to our staff. Huge jerk. I don't know if I could get in trouble for saying that. I mean, I'm not an employee anymore, but most of other people, but like we got to meet Kelly Ripa, and she and her husband and her kids and her parents were just like the most lovely people. Yeah. You know, no.
I think it's like the Avenue Q Broadway song, everybody's a little bit racist. It's basically true. And the thing is with racism,
it's true.
The thing with racism is, so like if you're walking down the street and you see a black person walking on the sidewalk and you go to the other side of the street or a different sidewalk, that comes from a racist like belief
my
in your
God.
head, and you don't know it. Like, it's just like something natural to do. Or if you see someone who's Asian American and you like back away because you're afraid they may have coronavirus, that would also be. So it's these little things overall that people have in their heads, and you just have to realize it and try to change it. It doesn't have to be full out blatant, like I hate black people or I hate Asian people. It can be very subtle things that you just have
like
picked up over
microaggression.
time.
And and a lot of it does come from, it's passed down because, I've never seen a tiny little kid be racist. They learn it and they repeat what they learn. And man, it's really frustrating. And you don't even learn, like, things you learn and you learn later, you're like, oh, I should never have said that. Like, when you realize you were wrong, stop doing it and make different decisions from then on out.
I think this has been a really good conversation. It talks about racism because all of it is involved with the increase in hate crimes against Asian Americans due to political pressures from the last administration around the world, political issues. So we'll keep you informed on our Twitter page, and keep reading the news and learn about it yourself, about the
major
shootings in Atlanta.
We'll put out updates when we have them on our next. We're out 2 days a week, and we also do a live on Friday, which includes a news wrap up. So anything we have, we will definitely talk about then too if new information comes out. But for right now, 8 people have passed away, and the shooter is a 21-year-old white boy. I think it was Robert Aaron. What's his name? Full name? Robert Aaron Long. Sorry, and he is booked. And at this point, it appears they are connected, but is not completely confirmed. And it does not appear at this point there are any other suspects. And there is video footage of a lot of this, and they were all Asian-run spas. And at this point, as far as we know, all the victims were Asian women?
I believe so.
The ones what's been talked about so far as of this recording is that the victims at this point are all Asian women. So it does appear to be a hate. Well, it looks like a hate crime against the Asian community.
Yeah. Well, we will leave it at that, and we will see you again on Thursday. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
So, hey guys, we want to remind everyone that you can keep in touch with us on all of our social media channels, whether that is Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. You can do all of that at the ComaCast.
And we definitely love to interact and hear from all of our listeners. All of this is not possible without you guys.